Hey guys, Rob here at 3D Printscape. Today we're going to talk about controlling your printer with Octoprint. We're going to go through the initial setup, the base configuration, talk about what hardware is needed, and everything in between. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, first let's talk about what Octoprint is. Octoprint is an application that allows you to control your printer remotely via either a browser from your desktop, laptop, tablet, or whatever the case may be, or from a mobile app on your iPhone or Android device. It makes actually sending files to the printer much easier. So instead of having to actually put your G-code file on the SD card and then browse to it and all of that from the actual device, you can just send it over through Cura or through the online browser, which we'll go through all of that in this video. So, all right, now let's talk about what hardware we need. First, you're going to need a Raspberry Pi, either a 3 or 4. This is a 4, and then I've got the camera accessory with it. I will link to both of these in the description below, along with everything else we'll be talking about in this video. This was a full bundle kit for the Raspberry Pi, and then the camera itself was separate, but it was just 2 actual items that I ordered instead of having to go through and order each piece individually like you would a lot of times with the Raspberry Pi. That did not come with the USB cable, so you will need a USB cable in order to actually connect it to the printer itself, which I will show you how to make that connection here shortly. It did come with an SD card, which goes here, and it came with the SD card reader plus the case. Now, the case wasn't much extra. Actually, I think it would have been cheaper. Actually, I think it would have been more expensive for me to buy everything separately without the case than buying the bundle. So I went ahead and went with the bundle. You can also print the case itself as well if you want. You have a lot of options when it comes to printing. You can also print cases that are made for the printer you're working with. Some of them have mounts that can go underneath the actual build surface, just so it's tucked out of the way. There are a lot of options there. So don't think that just because you're buying the case that you're stuck with that one, and don't try breaking apart the bundles because you don't want the case, because it will end up costing you more. Alright, so now let's talk about how to actually connect this to the printer. Alright, so I've got my Ender 3 here. Like I was mentioning before, you just have your USB cable, and then it connects directly to the control box on this guy. So let's go ahead and plug it in really quick. There's a USB port right under the actual print build, or the print bed here. It's right next to where the SD card is. Alright, so now that that's connected, I want to go ahead and power it up just to kind of show you what it does here. Alright, so it's now loading up. Keep in mind that the Raspberry Pi does have wireless, so it's actually on the network now. The main thing I wanted to power this up for was to show you that it's actually powering on the display and the control panel itself without actually having power going to the printer. We'll talk about this more in the video. You just got to be careful with this because it's not enough power to actually print anything, because it's not going to be enough power to heat up any of the probes, because you just got, I think it's a little 12-watt power adapter, maybe less, that comes for the Raspberry Pi. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into the setup, but before we do, make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe. Alright, let's go ahead and get started by downloading the software that we're going to need. So let's go ahead and grab OctoPi, Refuse, and if you're looking to run multiple instances of Octoprint, you're also going to want to get an SSH client such as Putty, but we'll grab that one later. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, first let's go ahead and grab OctoPi. That's going to be the actual image for Octoprint. So just go ahead and search for Octoprint. Click on that main link and just go straight to downloads. Now they do have the actual software itself if you wanted to install it manually, go through compiling it. For what we're going to be doing, there's really no value in that. So let's just go ahead and get OctoPi. It's the easiest way to get things going. So let's go ahead and grab this guy. Alright, we're also going to need software to mount the OctoPi image onto the SD card. I use Refuse. There is other free software available, but I've used Refuse for a while and it works, so I've just kind of stuck with that. So let's go ahead and grab that as well. Alright, let's go to Refuse download. I will have links to all of this in the description below. Alright, and then we just want to get the latest here, so 3.10. Alright, so now that we got both of those, we can go ahead and actually create the SD card. So I am assuming that you will have an SD card already set up. So let's go ahead and launch Refuse and walk through that process. Alright, now that we have Refuse up, let's go ahead and unzip OctoPi so that we actually have the image that we're going to mount. So I've got that here. So let's go ahead and extract all. This might take a second. It's not too large of an image, but it is a couple gig. And while we're waiting for that, make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe. It'll really help us out. Alright, now we actually have the ISO. This image file or ISO is going to be what we're actually mounting to the SD card. We just need to know the path of it, which is going to be here. Now let's go back over to Refuse. As you can see here, it shows a 32 gig volume for the H drive. That's just my SD card. Refuse will automatically pick up any SD or USB drives that you have attached to it. Alright, now we want to actually tell it to use that ISO we just unzipped. So let's go ahead and put that path here and then select that file. And then we just hit start. And this is going to take a couple minutes. Alright, so it is warning us that it's going to erase everything on the drive. It's going to be putting that image on there in a bootable partition, so that's going to be expected. But if you do have anything else on that drive, make sure you get it off before moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And it's deleting everything and then starting to actually write the image. So I'll go ahead and speed this up, and we'll walk through actually setting up the configuration when it's done. Alright, so that's ready. Let's go ahead and close Refuse. Now we should be able to see the config part of the drives here. This is only a small part of the actual image, but it's the only part that you can edit. So one thing that we do have to do in here is set up our wireless connection. If you're planning on plugging in with just a Ethernet cable, you don't have to do this, but I would recommend just running it over wireless. It's just a lot easier, but there is a setup you have to do. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. Okay, so let's go ahead and find our wireless config file. It's this OctoPi WPA file here. So let's go ahead and open that up. Alright, so my network is WPA2. Most of the more modern ones are going to be, so that's just what I'm selecting. If you have an older network, it might be under WEP, or if it's just completely open, I wouldn't recommend that at all. But if you are running an open wireless network, you can just use this one here. So let's go ahead and uncomment these lines that we're working with. So we just uncomment it by removing the pound symbols, and then we have to put the SSID, which is just the network name here, and put the password here. So in my case, it's just going to be RBL, and then password I will enter in a second when I stop screen sharing, but that will go here. So let me go and enter that and then save it. Alright, one thing before I go ahead and enter the password, make sure you leave these quotes in here. If you remove them, it's going to break it. So just make sure that you don't modify that, just replace the values inside here. Alright, I got that file saved. Make sure that you did save it after you were done. If you need to, you can open it up again just to make sure that you have everything in there. Now we're just going to go ahead and eject this drive, and then go ahead and put it into the Raspberry Pi. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Eject. So now we can safely remove that, and let's jump over to the hardware. Alright, once your Raspberry Pi is booted up, let's go ahead and open up a new browser, and then we'll see if everything is working as expected. So assuming you have the wireless settings right, you should be able to just go to octopi.local. And then it will load with a "your connection is not private" warning. This is basically just because the certificate on there is local and it's not trusted by the computer, but it's okay to actually just go to advanced and then proceed to octopi.local. Now, if you are running multiple Octoprint servers on the same network, you're going to want to change the names. We can go over that later on in this video. There is a little bit to it, but if you are running multiple, it's something that's going to have to be required, so you don't have to enter the IP address every time. Alright, so here we go. Alright, now since this is the first time that we've loaded Octoprint, we'll just run through the setup wizard. Alright, so next, access control. I just create a standard username, just call it Rob, and then put in a password that you'll remember. Okay. Alright, so here you've really got two choices. You can enter the username and password that you would use to log on, and then you can create additional users if you want to later on, and I'll show you how to get to that. Or you can disable access control. But if you disable access control, anybody who's on the network can get to this and then potentially start printing things if you have files uploaded and connect to your printer. So I would recommend you keep access control enabled and just use that username and password that you set up to connect. Alright, so here it's whether you want to send anonymous data over to Octoprint. I never do that, so I'm just going to disable that. It's a preference thing. Just being in the IT field, I don't send that data over. Alright, online connectivity check. Here it's just testing, make sure that you can actually connect to everything. This 8.8.8.8 is just one of the Google IPs. It's just trying to ping it, just making sure that you can actually get outbound to the servers. Alright, so let's go to enable that and then hit next. Here you want to select whether or not you want to enable blacklist for your plugins. I will go ahead and enable it. I just don't have any plugins that I will have on the blacklist, at least right now. But if something does come up, at least it gives me the option to add it. And then if you do add something to the blacklist, that just means that it will prevent it from actually using it. Alright, so go into next. Default profile. Let's go ahead and set up. I've got a couple printers that I'll end up setting up, but we'll start with my Endor 3. So Endor would help if I can type today. There's 3 Pro. Alright, so now your print bed and build volume. These are all going to be default settings here, but in order to get your width, depth, and height, I'm going to go ahead and open Cura because that'll have all of that there since I've already got my printer set up. If you don't have your printer set up in Cura, go ahead and watch the video I have on that. I'll link that in the description below as well. Alright, so here we've got Cura. Apparently there's an update. I'll get to that in a bit. But if you go to your printer here, manage printers, and go to machine settings, you can get the values that you need here for Octoprint. So it's going to be 235, 235, and 250. Alright, and then make sure you have heated bed selected. Your origin is going to be lower left, and then the form factor is rectangle. If you want to set restrictions on speed, you can do that here. I kind of just leave this default, and I let Cura control that. And then here you would define your extruder settings. So I'm using a standard 0.4mm nozzle, and then I have one extruder on that. So let's go and hit next and finish. Alright, so now we are actually in Octoprint. So let's go through a couple settings here. Right now I have Octoprint actually connected to this printer with a USB cable, so we'll go ahead and just do a connection to show you how that works. If you don't have that done yet, this won't actually work until you're connected. On that same note, the USB connection will actually turn on the machine. So right now, even though my printer, the main power setting is off, the actual display is on. It's getting the power to do that from the Raspberry Pi. One thing to note there is it will not have enough power to actually heat any of the probes. So before you go to print, you will want to turn on the actual power supply to the printer. I made that mistake the first time, not realizing that I actually had it powered off, and I went to go print something, and of course it errored out. Alright, so let's go ahead and click here, Save Connection Settings, and then you can either choose to have it auto connect on startup or not. If you have more than one printer, I wouldn't do it. If you just have the one, it doesn't hurt anything. So let's go ahead and do a connect. You want to leave the serial port on auto, and same with the actual speed, and then it will go through and set everything that's needed. Alright, so as you can see here, I am connected. And then if we go through here, you can see that I have a camera set up on that. You have your G-code viewer, and then if you have your camera set up, you can also use your time lapse and all of that as well. You have a couple choices there. You can either have it on a timed interval for the time lapse, whatever duration. So in this example, every 10 seconds it will take an image. And then you can have a duration of the final picture at the end that it saves as well. So if you wanted to have the final image up for 10 or 15 seconds, just change this to 15 and then save changes. I'll go ahead and change it back. I'm not actually printing anything right now, so I don't need that. There's also on Z change. You will have to be doing the print from Octoprint, but I mean that's kind of the reason why we're setting it up, so it shouldn't be an issue. But it will actually just take your recordings every time there's a change on the Z axis. It's a lot more complex. I don't use it. It gives you more options, I guess, but for me, timed works just fine, so I typically just use that. Alright, here you would see whatever temperature the bed and the extruder is at. Right now they're off, so it's just the ambient temperature in the room. One other thing you're going to want to do initially is make sure we have the latest version. So we want to go to our settings, which was that wrench I just clicked on, and then software update. And then as you can see here, we're on 1.3.12. There's a 1.4 that's available. I'll just go ahead and check updates just to make sure nothing new came up. So let's go ahead and just update it just so we are on the latest version. This shouldn't take too long, but it will restart it, so you probably have to log back in. Alright, as you can see there, the actual upgrade was successful. Now it's just reloading, and then we'll have to reload this interface. And while that's going, let's go ahead and jump over to Cura. There is a plugin that you're going to need. Let's go over to Marketplace and go to Plugins. Let this load for a second. There's a Octoprint plugin that allows Cura to actually interact directly with Octoprint so that you can send the prints that allows you to send the prints over to Octoprint and to the printer itself without having to use any SD cards or go back and forth or anything like that. So it's just in the standard list here. least it's, here we go, Octoprint connection. So we want that. We're going to want to install it and agree to the license. Now that it's installed, we have to restart Cura in order to actually use it. Alright, so let me show you a couple things over on the Octoprint side first, and then we'll jump back over to Cura. But before we do that, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Alright, so if you are having any issues with the printer, you would want to go to settings, which is where I was just at, and then go to logging. Any of your actual log output would be here. So if there are errors, this is going to be where it's at. You just go ahead and download this guy, and then you can review the actual data. There's probably not going to be much here right now because it's all working, but if there was an issue, this is where it would be at. And then again, we talked about how to update the software. You just go back in here, go to software update, check for update now. As you can see, we're on the latest version, and if there was a new version though, it would say that a new version is available. Then you just go to update like we did earlier. Going back to the user settings, if we go up to access control, you can see that we have the account that I created when we went through the setup wizard. You can add additional accounts if you wanted to split those out. Let's say, for example, if you have multiple people in the house using this, you can have different accounts for each of them, or you can just use the same account. I guess that doesn't really matter. The important thing there is that you are using access control. Don't leave it open, because if somebody did get on your network and they can start controlling your printer, that can end badly. Alright, so let's go ahead and close that back out. Connect to our printer again, and we're connected. And let's jump back over to Cura. Let's go to the printer itself. Yeah, no, I need to update. Let me close this so I can get rid of the warning. Alright, sorry about that. Alright, so let's go to Manage Printers. Now you'll see Connect Octoprint. This wasn't here before we installed that plugin. So let's go ahead and select that. And then here we would either point to the octopi.local, which is the default DNS entry, or if you have multiple ones set up, you'd have to change this to point to the new one. So you just add, and then you would put the instance name and IP or host name there. But because in this example right now we only have the one, this is fine. So you will need an API to actually interact. API is just an authentication mechanism that is used by software to talk back and forth between applications. I guess that's the simplest way to describe it. It's much more complex than that, but that's a whole separate conversation. Alright, so let's just go ahead and request. You could create it over in the browser itself ahead of time and then just copy and paste, but it's easier if we just request it, because then you'll get a pop-up saying that Cura has requested, and if you just go ahead and allow it, it will automatically populate the key here, so then you're good. Alright, so now we should be able to just do a test connect, and that is good. Alright, so let's close out of these. Let me go ahead and grab a 3D object really quick so we can use that as an example. Alright, so I found one of the heat tower that I did on the previous video. So all of the settings and stuff here are going to be the same. Nothing's really going to change. You're going to want to follow the same process you've always done before. Your difference is when you go to slice, you have now the option to print with Octoprint, or you can still save it to file. If you print with Octoprint here, it's going to send it directly to the printer, or to Octoprint, then you can send it to the printer. So let's go ahead and do that. I want to walk you through that process. Alright, so, and then once it sends it over, it's kind of cool. It automatically opens up the camera here and gives you all of the data. But if we go over to Octoprint now, you'll see that it's starting to actually print, heat up, sorry. And then we've got the file over here. Here's the G-code file. Let me go ahead and actually turn on the power supply so it can heat up properly. Alright, so we're connected again. Like I mentioned before, just make sure you have that power supply turned on so that the printer can actually do its job. So now we can go ahead and load this, which will bring everything up here so you can see all of the settings, and then you can print, or you could have gone to load and print, which will automatically bring it up here and then start to print. So if we hit print now, you will see it starting to heat up the bed and then the extruder. And then if you wanted to, you can go over to the terminal and you'll get the actual output of everything that's going on in the printer. You can also go to G-code viewer, but there's not much at this point. Alright, and then here you'd be able to see the control again, or the camera. You can make adjustments. Right now I just have the camera off to the side. There are mounts you can print to actually attach it to the Z-axis, or you can just set up a separate mount on this side. The choice is yours there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this print for now because I was just trying to show you as an example. I don't actually want to print this. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel. Alright guys, one more thing I wanted to set up before I actually show you how to change the DNS name of this server so that you can have multiple Octoprint servers set up, or Raspberry Pi set up in one network, is here. Like I was showing you before, when we pushed this from Cura, it added it to the files list. You can also import. So if you wanted to upload, you have a couple choices here. I've got just a copy of this file, really just a different name, but you can drag and drop to upload it here, or you can just go to upload and then it's on desktop. Just select that, and then that'll also upload it. It has the same name here, so it just overwrote the existing one. But then once this is up, you can load it and then go ahead and kick off your print as well. Alright, so that's really all I wanted to show you in the UI. If you guys would like, I can go into more details on any section, so just leave a comment below if you need any more information. Make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe. Now we're going to go jump over to modifying that DNS name. So let's go ahead and get that set up. Alright, so the first thing we're going to need is SSH tool. PuTTY's free and easy to use, so I'll just recommend that. So let's go ahead and download that. There are a bunch of other tools available on the market, so whether you want to use a free one or pay for one like MOBA Xterm, if you're in and out of SSH shells all the time, that would be great. But for a one-off thing like this, just go ahead and get PuTTY. So let's go ahead and download that. We want to go to download PuTTY, so go here, and then we want the standalone version. We don't want to have to worry about installing it, so we can get the 32 or 64-bit version. If you have a more modern computer, 64-bit's probably going to be fine. If you're questioning it, the 32-bit will also run, but I'll just grab the 64-bit, go and download that, and then we can open that up. I'm going to put a link to all of the instructions in the description below, so if there's anything that you needed to catch up on, or if you had any questions on the process, you can always reference the links from Octoprint. Alright, so let's go ahead and connect. Let's go to octopi.local. If I can type. Alright, so we're going to want to accept the security warning here. Alright, and then... Alright, so the default username and password is going to be Pi for the username and Raspberry for the password. So let me go ahead and enter that. Apparently I mistyped it. Alright, and then you can see here that the IP address is 10.0.1.235. Your DNS is octopi.local. Alright, and then as a reminder, the reason why we're wanting to change this is Anytime you bring a new OctoPi online, it's automatically going to come online with octopi.local. So if you already have one online, you're going to have conflicting DNS entries, and you're going to have a hard time accessing either one of them. It might go to one, it might go to the other. It's hard to say for sure. So just changing the existing one ahead of time makes the most sense. So let's go ahead and do that. Like I mentioned before, I'm going to add a link to the actual instructions in the description below. It's provided by Octoprint, but it's up on GitHub. The process is pretty easy, but it does require you to be familiar with just SSH and shell. Alright, so step one is going to be, we got to change the host name. So let's do that. So we're going to sudo nano /etc host, oops, and hit enter. Now we got to re-enter the password for the Pi user, which is the Raspberry. Alright, now that we're in, you can see that we have the actual name here. So let's go ahead and change that. Let's just we'll go with OctoPi 2. So we'll enter that, and then we'll go and hit Control X to save it, then hit Y for yes, and enter. Then you can also do a cat on that file to make sure that it saved those changes. So just cat etc hostname. And then as you can see here, it did change. So that's the actual host name. The next one we want to do is the host file. So it'll be sudo nano etc host. And then we want to change the, we want to change this guy here to match what we just did. So this would be OctoPi 2, looping back to 127.0.1.1. And then Control X, Y, enter. Then we'll do the same thing, just do a cat just to make sure that it did actually change. And as you can see here, it did. Alright, and then at this point we just want to reboot it. So sudo reboot. And then obviously we lost the connection there. This will take, I don't know, probably 30 seconds, but then it'll be back online with the new name. Alright, as you can see here, what we were hitting before, the octopi.local is no longer responding. If we go to octopi2.local, it should come up with the instance that we were running before. Alright, one thing I did want to point out is if you do change the name, you are going to have to relink Cura or any other APIs that you already have in place. So as an example here, before I had send to Octoprint, now I just have saved a file. And if I go back into manage printers, I'm going to connect to Octoprint, the API key is gone. So I've got to request that again and then go ahead and allow. Then it will re-add it back in there. So then connect, close, close, and then if we slice, now we're good. Print with Octoprint. So that'll send it right over. Alright, now that you can see that that's here now, if we wanted to load it, we can see all the details. Alright, so the point of going over all of that part was, if you plan on having multiple printers using Octoprint on your network, go ahead and change the DNS name up front so that you can add the new ones in there. I would just start with octopi 1, octopi 2, octopi 3. That way when the new one comes online, it'll come online as octopi.local. Then you can just go ahead and change the name to .whatever, and you'll be good there. It just saves you a headache down the road. Now, if you know you're never going to have more than one printer on the network, then there's no point in it. So it's really judgment call on your side. For me personally, I go ahead and change it just because I have 2 printers. But again, that's going to be, what do you think you're going to have? And if it came down to it and you did have to go and reset everything back up, how much time is it going to take? So it's just balancing the time factor there. Alright, so that covers everything related to the initial configuration for Octoprint. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you would like to see additional videos like this, go ahead and leave a comment kind of requesting what you'd like me to go over. I have probably 5 or 6 of these lined up, just going over different configurations inside of Octoprint and some of the settings that might be worth changing, but I want to make sure it's valuable to you guys before I spend the time trying to create the video. So please go ahead and leave some feedback, and then make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. Alright guys, so that covers everything you need to get started with Octoprint. We went over the actual setup and configuration of the application. We went through the UI. We talked about where to find error logs if you have any issues. We talked about setting up additional users, going through importing G-code files directly into Octoprint, pushing to them via Cura. And we also talked about setting up or modifying DNS on the actual device so that you can have multiple Octoprint devices on the network at the same time without having DNS issues. If you have any questions about anything that we've gone over today, please feel free to leave a comment below. I'll try to get back to everybody as quickly as possible. If you guys don't use Octoprint or don't find it valuable, I'd also be interested in hearing about that as well. Like I said, I'm just trying to get feedback from everybody, understand what people in our community don't like, what tools they use, and really just trying to do research to help better everybody. Make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe. Talk to you next time.